Alrighty, folks, we're going to talk a little bit about gender with Joe Rogan and Bill Burr. Well, not with them, but at them. This is a pretty straightforward reaction video, unscripted and informal. That is one of a handful of videos I recorded to put out while I am having or recovering from heart surgery. So please forgive me for not being in the comments section the way I normally would be. I'm hoping the video will give you all something to talk about, and I promise to get to the comments when I'm back. Because this was unscripted and pretty informal, there's a few things I wanted to make super duper clear. One, the language is really loose. I'm going to use words like totally, and a lot of the time I'm using it more like Jeff Spicoli than to mean completely accurate. Almost nothing that Joe Rogan or Bill Burr say in this video is completely accurate. One of the reasons I wanted to make that clarification is that there are morally relevant consequences to this sort of discussion, and I want to make perfectly clear what conclusions I argue for in the video. And there's really only two of them. That in general, it's more likely that a little boy will be biologically or naturally inclined towards more aggressive play. And it might be more likely that little girls will be more inclined towards collaborative or cooperative or caring sorts of play. It is also 100% scientifically demonstrated that some little girls will be biologically and naturally inclined to whoop ass on the boys and be the most aggro little beasts you've ever seen. Similarly, there will be plenty of little boys who will be biologically and naturally inclined to participate in caring sorts of play. And the second claim I'm trying to support is you're probably doing something wrong and harmful if you're profoundly trying to coerce or encourage or force your child to participate in sorts of play that they're not naturally inclined to want to participate in, based on your ideas of how you think they should play because of their sex or gender. The only other thing I want to mention is I have a graphic about shoe size that I use, and the numbers aren't going to match up entirely with what I say, because the graphic I grabbed just so happened to be about old people. So those numbers will be a little different. So, I hope you enjoy the video. I hope it gives you something to think about and talk about. I look forward to checking out the discussion when I return.
I think what's going on is that men we have different DNA, and the genes are aggressive, and men are supposed to be doing reckless shit.
Okay, already stopping it, because the language, for the most part, what he's saying makes sense, but every chunk of scientific explanation of biological sex-linked differences will show that dudes are more inclined to being aggressive. So XY is going to make you, in general, if we took 100 boys and 100 little girls, the boys on the whole would be more aggressive. But that doesn't mean each individual one would naturally be more aggressive. The evidence shows that there's going to be some overlap. The other thing I don't like about it is the supposed to be. What does that mean? Supposed to be by what? I'm guessing, from what I know about Joe Rogan, which is probably more than you would think I know, because I'm kind of a Joe Rogan fan, is he would be relying on some sort of evolutionary biology sort of explanation. But evolution doesn't really give us supposed tos, unless you assume survival's the ultimate goal and particular traits that were selected for at a particular time are somehow christened to be good and fulfilling our purpose now. I have to do a video on evolutionary ethics and evolutionary biology explanations of right and wrong and morality. Think of it like wisdom teeth, right? They may have been a huge advantage a while ago, but now we just don't fucking need them. And if anything, they're just more risk of infection and nastiness. Whatever evolutionary biological explanation one has for a higher probability of aggressive behavior in boys than girls could be the same thing. So we need an argument as to how and why the trait's good, not just that it's natural, if you're going to say supposed to.
Right.
That's
I'm just saying it's not society didn't sit down they didn't watch 3 cereal commercials and then be like, oh, I need to be fucking this. I just think that's just some bullshit that adults came up with. And
it's not just adults. It's almost always women. It's women that think that there's something wrong with the way men are raising their sons. They think there's something that, like, this idea of these men raising these kids and these kids being aggressive is because of the way they're being coached. That's not true. That's just a part of being a boy.
Okay, a couple of things. Again, some big, wild swinging generalizations from Joe Rogan. There's probably are more women making the sorts of claims that he's talking about because they likely would have come from like second wave feminism or overlapped with the mistake of psychological behaviorism, like hardcore psychological behaviorism of the last century, where for a period of time it was really popular to believe that all of our behaviors were like really determined entirely by psychological conditioning, operant conditioning. And that's obviously a load of shit. We know that common sense is closer to right, that it's some nature and some nurture. We have biological sorts of genetic and natural dispositions and inclinations, and then society shapes them. And those two things work hand in hand. And we're finding out new and interesting ways they work hand in hand all the time, like particular traits that are only expressed in particular genes that turn on shit going on in your body that only happen if environmental factors X, Y, and Z take place. So it's both of those working hand in hand. So the idea that dudes are making little boys more aggressive just by how they raise them or treat them is false. But I also think plenty of people would be critical of mothers. There are plenty of mothers who are going to be like, oh, you're not a real man, or, you know, you got to be tough, or you got to man up, or plenty of people say that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a little bit of a wild, swinging, big, generalized claim, but I'm guessing that's where it's coming from. As for Bill's contention, I think if he's responding to the idea that it's 100% socially determined, that little 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old kids are being their behaviors being exclusively determined by their parents or what they see on TV, yeah, that's bonkers. That's bananas. We have lots of evidence to show that that's not the case. But to say it's not being influenced at all would be just as bananas. Because kids are learning like insane amounts of shit. Their brains are developing insanely when they're little and developing. And what they're witnessing, what's modeled for them, what they're seeing is influencing everything. So again, it would be really, really wildly inaccurate to say it's 100% natural. And it'd be really, really wildly inaccurate to say it's 100% socially conditioned.
Shit ton of studies if people wanted to actually look at the science. I mean, if you leave boys alone with toys and girls alone with toys, boys will gravitate towards trucks and fucking, you know, things that they can hit and smash, and girls sit down there with little teacups and they play with dolls. It's natural. It's just 100% natural.
Yeah. Well,
there was a documentary on babies.
Okay, before he gets into babies, what he's saying is mostly true. One of the things that when people have dug into the research with regard to sex length and sex characteristic differences in behavior of young kids, they always come down to a handful of things, which are boys are going to be a little bit more aggressive, a little more physical, slower to learn language, and I think the other one is as they age, they're going to be more motivated by sex. Shocker to all of those. Girls are going to do a little more cooperative play and nurturing sorts of play. They're going to have better command of language earlier, and they're going to be less motivated by sex. But there's something really important that has to be said in order to make any of this make sense, which is there is no scientific research that supports the idea that little boys 100% are more aggressive than little girls 100%. These are all just generalizations. There's huge overlap. Think of it like shoe size, right? That's something quantifiable that we know is a sex-linked trait. Women's shoe size, on average, is like an 8.5 to 9 in the United States. Men's 10.5 to 11. But if we plot out the bell curves of shoe size, which I'm going to go back and do because I have these sorts of charts available, because I used to cover this in class, there's going to be a huge overlap. There are plenty of women who have bigger feet than dudes. Plenty of dudes with smaller feet than women. And inclinations to behave, why would we think they would be any different? Right? We have typical, right? Or average. The median or the mean, whichever one you want to do. Those are always going to be, whatever's like the typical dude and the typical woman are really going to be a relatively small percentage of the population. Having a size 8.5 to 9 foot is the average for women, but still only like 12 to 15% of women wear an 8.5 shoe. So you're leaving out 85% of women if you're thinking they should all be like that. And the same with dudes. It's going to be less than 15% of dudes who wear a size 11 shoe. It's the most frequent and the average, but you're leaving out 85% of dudes if you're expecting all dudes to naturally wear an 11. You can tell I've used that example in classes before because I had it at the ready. So hopefully the rest of this conversation will justify me trotting it out, and I won't cut it out.
Well, you know what? They bees are gender neutral. They're raising their kids gender neutral, so they don't call them a boy or a girl.
And my thing with that is there's no way you're not saying to your son, you're sure you don't want to wear the dress? And then the kid wants to wants the parents' approval. Yeah, I didn't want that football. I guess I wanted the dress. And it's just like I said.
So there's something interesting here. The they bees thing. I don't see, if someone's just like, hey, we're going to let our kid figure out who they are all together and support them, whatever they do. I would think any parent would want to do that. If one of the ways someone feels good about doing that is trying to make conscious effort or to be really neutral with regard to gendered language or something, whatever. There's an interesting tension, though, here in what Bill's saying now, but what he said at the beginning. Right at the beginning, he said, I can't believe that it would have been caused by the commercials they've seen, like the social conditioning. But now he's saying, I can't imagine that even the subtle cues that a parent would be giving wouldn't be influencing the kid. And so he's both right and wrong in both cases because he's pointing out, yeah, subtle cues can influence kids, but they can influence kids in both directions. Maybe seeing mom doing reproductive labor around the house and cooking or whatever leaks in. But also, if someone's really going out of their way to like encourage their kid to play with non-gendered toys in a way that really pushes them to fight against some gendered ideal, that could influence them too. And I guess the risk with the they bees thing, who cares? I think the only risk there is sometimes maybe the parents, if their kid really was just naturally inclined towards kind of the gendered toys and play and behavior that the parents might be wary of, they might push the kids away from it. Because what Joe was saying about play is totally true. You go to a preschool where they're like giving kids only like pine cones and blocks and shit to play with, the little dudes are going to be turning dolls into hand grenades. And if you give the girls a truck, a lot of them, they might turn it into a bassinet for a pine cone that they're going to make care for a baby. But you're also going to have girls who are just whooping ass on the boys and the first to throw the grenade. And you're also going to have some dudes who are going to be wanting to play house with the girls and wearing a tutu and singing Katy Perry songs. Not because their parents forced them to, but because that's what they were into.
You know, my kid's barely 2, so what the fuck do I know? I'm just saying my limited experience at kids' birthday parties is it's not even how it was ever even questioned that like they're too young. They're fucking year and a half, 2 years old. Like you're telling me that society has already they have.
Yeah, so I think some of what they're saying is right. Some of it's not quite right. All of the science supports common sense that some of it's nature, some of it's nurture. It also all supports the notion that in general, boys are going to be more aggressive, yada, 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 and girls are going to be more collaborative and caring and doing that sort of play. But there's going to be tons and tons, not just an insignificant number, not like 1 out of 100, but I'm going to say like, I don't know what the numbers are, but just anecdotally, 3 or 4 out of every 20. So 1 or 2, 10 to 20% of all boys will be more comfortable at playing with the girls and playing with the teacups, as Joe put it. And probably 10 to 20% of the girls will be beating the boys' ass in every physical game. And anybody who's been around kids or a preschool will absolutely 100% verify that, or they are lying. Bet they are full of shit, or they're teaching somewhere that they're forcing the kids to do stupid shit. So the takeaway I would say is, if you have a kid who seems inclined towards playing a particular way and they're not doing anything harmful or hurtful to other people, let them play that way. And it could be 100% natural that they want to play that way. If your little girl is suplexing dudes in the sandbox, but they're all for it and they're wrestling and having a good time, good for her. And if your little dude is more comfortable playing house and wearing the tutu and belting out Katy Perry jams, support him in doing that. Because if you're forcing them to do something else, you're either trying to cram their size 12 foot into a size 8.5 shoe, or you're trying to take their size 7 shoe and stretch it out so it becomes an 11. And both of those are going to be spectacularly harmful and uncomfortable. See how I tied that all back together? It's almost like I've done this before. Thanks so much for the time. Bye.